Two escaped convicts masquerade as beauty pageant directors in Happy, Texas.
And Russell Crowe and Burt Reynolds bring big-time hockey to the small town of Mystery, Alaska.
What do you see here?
Bunkers, sir.
What do you see in those bunkers?
Stuff they stole from Kuwait.
I'm talking about millions in Kuwaiti bullion.
You mean them little cubes you put in hot water and make soup?
No, not the little cubes you put in hot water to make soup.
Mark Wahlberg and Ice Cube have a map, and George Clooney thinks it may lead to something. Maybe the gold that Saddam Hussein has stolen from Kuwait in Three Kings, one of 5 new movies we'll review this week. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I am Jeff Greenfield of CNN, back to discover if you can indeed make a living doing this kind of work.
I don't think we'll be able to answer that question for you this week, Jeff. Okay, first movie, and Three Kings is one of the most surprising and exciting movies I've seen this year. Not just an action picture, although it does have a lot of action, but also a comedy and a movie with strong political views about the 1991 Gulf War. The movie starts right after a peace treaty is signed, ending Operation Desert Storm, but when Special Forces veteran George Clooney commandeers a map showing the location of Saddam's stolen gold, his private war is just beginning. Listen to the dialogue here as Clooney simultaneously exploits and satirizes wartime rhetoric.
Listen to me. We will rise up together. Tell him. Rise up. Look at us. Many races. Many nations. Many nations. Working together. Tell him, Chief.
Yes, we're united.
United. George Bush. George Bush wants you.
This clip shows how the studio wants to position the movie as an action picture. Well, it's got a lot of action, all right. That truck blows up real good, but the story drives the action instead of the other way around. I was exhilarated by Three Kings. I liked how smart it was and how edgy the performances were, and I liked its grainy visual look, and I especially liked how it avoided cliches about Arabs. David O. Russell's previous film, Flirting with Disaster, is one of the best comedies of 1996, and now, with a big studio budget, he announces his arrival as a major new director.
You know, I had some of the feeling in watching this movie that I got the first time I saw Robert Altman's MASH, or for that matter, the first time I saw Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
And that is a director who's got his own vision, who's not playing by any of the old rules, and who's going to constantly unsettle you. I mean, we should warn the audience, don't go expecting what you saw in the trailer. This is not some caper movie. And be aware that a lot of the violence in this, quite deliberately, is enormously unsettling. But that said, I thought this was one of the most original and powerful movies I have seen in a very long time.
I did too, and you know, one of the things he's able to do is have several layers of things going on in the same scene. You have action, you have political commentary, you have sardonic one-liners, and at the same time there's confusion. At various points people don't know who's shooting at who.
Now, that's one of the wonderful...
Who's an enemy, who's a friend.
It's one of the wonderful parts is when these guys come into where the gold is, and you, the audience, are sitting there going, wait a minute, I think I'm supposed to know who the good guys are, but are they dissidents? Are they pro-Saddam? What's going on here? And he's constantly, David Russell's constantly challenging you to think and not just get the sensory experience of this movie.
Exactly. There was one early review of this movie that said, well, he doesn't tell us what we should think about these people. And I thought, isn't that great? You know, it's not John Wayne where you know what to think about them. They're out there. It's a whole desert full of buccaneers.
And this is also one of those movies where the more stylized moments, which in some directors' hands are like, give me a break, I thought all worked to the purpose of this movie. This is a keeper, I thought. Well, next up, Happy, Texas, which begins with what must be the oldest devices in comedy. Mistaken identities, fish out of water. You saw it in Shakespeare. But it demonstrates that old wine in new bottles can offer terrific refreshment. Jeremy Northam, last seen in The Winslow Boy and An Ideal Husband, plays Harry Sawyer. And Steve Zahn plays Wayne Jr. I am not stammering. Two hapless convicts who escape from a chain gang and flee in a stolen Winnebago, which happens to belong to a gay couple who work as beauty pageant consultants. As luck and the plot would have it, the consultants have signed on to work in the small town of Happy, Texas. There's your title right there. There, the consultant impersonators find an appealingly vulnerable cash-rich bank and an appealingly vulnerable yet tough bank president, played agreeably by Ali Walker.
You want to go fetch the pants around here? We prefer to deal with Joe. Nothing personal.
Josephine McClintock. Folks around here call me Joe after my dad. See, he's dead, so I happen to own this bank.
Thus, the plot thickens. Harry explains to Wayne that they will hide out in Happy, Texas, help the town compete in the pageant, and knock off the bank. Wayne takes over the job of teaching his very young pageant charges the art of competition, helping out the local teacher played by Ileana Douglas. Something he is, to say the least, ill-prepared for.
Would you like to try to follow what he did?
Meanwhile, Harry, who's looking for inside information about the bank, finds himself drawn to Jo, and as her presumably safe gay male friend, he tells her what she has a right to expect from a boyfriend.
I should say I may have seen a woman in my life who was considered prettier, but I've never seen one more beautiful.
This is one of those movies with near perfect pitch. There are sweet moments, but they never turn saccharine. There are clever plot twists that never get in the way of humor, and the performances are terrific. And of special note, the work of William H. Macy, a great actor, here playing a down-home country sheriff whose suppressed sexual orientation is not just funny, it's very touching. You have the sense here that the filmmakers had a blast making Happy Texas, and the good news is that that good time comes right through the screen.
It really does, you know, and Steve Zahn, who is completely a fish out of water, as this guy with the funny mustache who turns up in town and suddenly he's a gay pageant director when in fact he's just born to be a convict, and studying the grainy videos in order to teach the 6-year-olds how to dance and then going through the choreographed routines. His physical humor in those scenes is just terrific.
Well, I love Zahn and Out of Sight, and he sort of has the patent on the dim bulb, not entirely dangerous except to himself felon. It's a wonderful turn, but this whole movie is just infused with one of those things that you just want to see sometimes in a movie. This is not a socially significant movie. It's just a whole lot of fun.
They know the material is funny. They know that it's there, and so they don't have to try for laughs. The laughs just come as they play the stuff more or less straight.
In television, when a sitcom resorts to sometimes sentiment, there's a phrase which I will clean up, MOS, moment of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, in this movie, I thought the tenderer moments work. They sort of take time out. They're not going at 100 miles an hour. There are some nice, sweet moments between man and women, and men, actually. And it just works.
It does. Coming up later in the show, Russell Crowe and Burt Reynolds face the New York Rangers in Mystery Alaska.
We're in this game!
And coming up next, Sarah Polley falls in love with an older man in Guinevere.
What do you have against women your own age?
Would it be possible for you not to take my picture?
Why?
I don't like to be looked at.
It's a little late for that.
Sarah Polley feels out of place at her sister's wedding in that scene, but the wedding photographer somehow seems to bring her reassurance and confidence in that scene from Guinevere. This is a thoughtful and touching love story, not about real pure romance and sex so much as about finding the person you need at a particular time in your life, whether or not society thinks it's an appropriate choice. The young woman named Harper is almost 21 in that scene, and the photographer who calls all of his women Guinevere is some 30 years older. Soon he has become her lover, and even more, her teacher.
Throw a little shot on his face. Oh, you're really good at that.
Really?
That's Stephen Ray, star of The Crying Game, as the shabby, alcoholic, and somewhat sad photographer. A relationship like this can't stand a lot of reality, but that's what it gets a real shot of when Harper's mother finds out about the relationship and makes an unexpected visit.
So, then what is a man of your age doing with my 21-year-old daughter? It'd be easy enough to say you're afraid of mature women, but that's so glib. I know exactly what she has that I haven't got. Aw.
That's Jean Smart in a devastatingly good supporting performance. Guinevere is a perceptive movie that doesn't go for cheap sentimentality, but looks at exactly what's going on in this relationship, which is not painted in pink, rose-colored terms. It's that two sad people come together out of need, and they both become a little happier as a result. Stories like this earn unhappy endings, so I was disappointed at the final fantasy sequence, which feels artificial and tacked on, but Guinevere is a very good movie.
I agree with you completely about Jean Smart. This is the most devastating performance of a mother since Angela Lansbury in The Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah.
It is a frightening view. And I liked a lot of the start of this movie. I thought it was very true. But to me, this was almost like a coming-of-age novel, the novel you have to write before you get on with, because once you realize that this situation isn't going anywhere, once you see that Stephen Ray is pretty much of a loser and he's gratifying his somewhat shabby life, as you said, with these younger women, my reaction was, yeah, and?
Yeah for him, but not yeah for her. I mean, first of all, it shouldn't go anywhere. In a conventional movie, it would go somewhere. The movie at least has the courage to see that while he is smart enough and experienced enough to give her something, and she is able to make use of it, that's true even though they don't have a future together.
Well, when you consider that this director's screenplay of a few years ago, The Truth About Cats and Dogs, was so clever and so smart, I just felt that I wanted more. I thought, you know, you could have said everything you had to say about this relationship, and they did in a very good first half hour, 40 minutes. There is certainly enough good stuff in here that you really want to see what this director's going to do next.
So is your thumb up or down?
My thumb, that's a highly personal question, by the way. My thumb is squarely in the middle on this one, if that's
Okay,
permissible.
well, you're going to have to decide by the end of the show.
Okay.
Coming up next, the New York Rangers face off against the home team of Mystery Alaska.
The committee feels you can best help the team by, you know, coaching. You're the guy. They all look up to you.
Scott, I don't coach.
Well, you'd be upset, too, if you were John Beebe. After years as a regular in the Saturday afternoon hockey game that is the big event in Mystery Alaska, he's been bumped from the team for a flashy 17-year-old, just when the little town finds itself in the white-hot media spotlight. A local boy-turned-sports writer has profiled this game in Sports Illustrated, and that has led to a proposal that the New York Rangers come up to play the Men of Mystery. At a town meeting, crusty but not yet lovable Judge Walter Burns, played by Burt Reynolds, finds his high-toned opposition bested by this simple piece of folk wisdom.
Where's the dignity in not trying? I'll play those Rangers. I'm in. I'll play.
As the town prepares for the big game, they confront issues without and within. Will the Rangers renege? Will the town sell out to corporate and commercial interests? One town father persuades little Richard, who will sing the national anthem, to perform it so slowly that the Rangers will come down with frostbite. But as the game moves into its final period, the Rangers' lead appears insurmountable. And this being a script co-written by David E. Kelly, it is time for an inspirational speech.
We're not beaten. I'm not beaten. We're in this game!
If you've seen the work of Kelly on TV, from Picket Fences to Chicago Hope to Ally McBeal in The Practice, you know he can be witty, edgy, and sometimes exasperatingly obvious. But what is ultimately disappointing is how utterly, totally predictable all of this is. At every key moment, this movie resorts to the tried and the truisms, to the tug at the heartstrings, the swelling music, the cardboard villains, the quirky, lovable, salt-of-the-earth good people. In the end, Mystery Alaska is a movie equivalent of painting by the numbers.
You know, it is, and it even includes all kinds of obligatory scenes. I mean, I expected it to have a big game at the end, but it also has a courtroom scene, and it also has a funeral, and it also has a teenage sex scene. And it also has the change of heart, where Burt Reynolds first is a bad guy, then he's a good guy. Burt Reynolds has a different emotional mood that he's called upon to express in every single scene. This is like a test in acting school. Every time you see him, he's got a different guy inside. And he does a good job with it, but come on, I mean, no one person can whirl around this quickly just because the plot wants to make him do it.
You know, they say of musicals sometimes you whistle the score coming into the theater, and that's how I felt about this movie. It's like, if I see one more movie where at the end of an inspirational speech, the audience begins to applaud this. Have you ever seen anybody applaud that way in real life, other than at some
but then there's a reprise in the movie, because later on, at the end, there's a standing ovation. First, one guy stands up, and then a few others stand up, and then everybody stands up. Come on, that whole town would be on its feet for the whole game.
It was the kind of movie where you kept hoping that something was going to happen that you didn't know was going to happen from the get-go, and it never, ever does.
Would it have helped if they'd all fallen through the ice? I guess not. Okay, next movie, and it's Drive Me Crazy, Still another movie about who's going to be whose date at the big high school dance. I figure this is maybe the 8th film this year that asked that same question. I think it's time for a story where they cancel the prom because nobody has a date. What makes Drive Me Crazy better than a lot of these movies is that the characters are a little more intelligent and they have smarter dialogue. Melissa Joan Hart, who plays Sabrina the Teenage Witch on television, stars as the chairman of the high school centennial dance. After a last-minute disappointment, she needs a date and invites her childhood friend and next-door neighbor, played by Adrienne Grenier.
We can save each other from disgrace.
Each other? What's in it for me?
If you have to ask, you're not as smart as you think you are.
She's one of the most popular girls in school, and he's more of an outsider, but she takes him shopping, and he cleans up nicely.
Even though I might be dreaming, I don't care, I want more.
Do you like them? They're the latest.
But I don't know.
Of course, there's got to be a vixen who's the rival of the sweet blonde girl. Her name this time is Alicia, and she's played by Susan May Pratt.
Why'd you do it?
Time for change.
It's not you.
Hey, who knows who I am?
I do.
Drive Me Crazy has one thing going for it, and that is that the characters are as articulate and thoughtful as real high school students and not the doofuses that we usually get in these movies. I appreciated individual moments, but I didn't get really involved in the outcome. And when I saw Adrienne Grenier, I was reminded of his work in a much better teenage movie from last August named The Adventures of Sebastian Cole, where he played a kid whose mother moves to England and whose stepfather decides to become a woman. Now, those are more interesting challenges than who to take to the centennial dance.
Certainly at my high school. I did think that the rivalry between the two girls, one blonde and one dark-haired, reminded me of Betty and Veronica. I didn't know if this was an homage. But I have to disagree with you on how articulate these kids were. I thought this movie was like a Dawson's Creek wannabe. I thought the movie strained to sound the way Kevin Williamson seems to naturally be able to write teenagers who are more articulate than most teenagers, but it works. In this movie, you know, I was at a loss. Now, I did see this movie in the presence of some teenagers who liked it, and I have to say, as someone who has ties older than most of the cast members, I sometimes feel a little humble about describing whether this is a good movie or not, because the movie's clearly aimed at that age group. But I did think this movie really didn't have much to say and didn't say it in a very interesting way.
I may be a victim of having seen the other 8 teenage prom movies this year, because actually these characters are a lot smarter than most of the teenage characters who are trying to decide who to go to the prom, believe it or not. Although you're right that if Kevin Williamson had done this movie, it probably would have been smarter still, but nevertheless, it doesn't work, so there you have it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Coming up next, the video pick of the week, 2 mummies, one classic, one state-of-the-art.
Roger Ebert in the Movies Video Pick of the Week is brought to you by Nestle's Raisinets. At the movies or at home, Raisinets.
2 versions of The Mummy are new on video this week, and the contrast between them says a lot about changing styles of filmmaking. This is a scene from the classic 1932 version of the story, starring Boris Karloff as a mummy who returns to life inspired by a love that spans the centuries. The movie is all dark shadows and creepy atmosphere, and here's one of the most famous moments. Did that mummy move? Could it be alive? Well, there's no doubt that the mummy is alive in the 1999 version of the story, starring Brendan Fraser in a special effects extravaganza. Not only does the mummy move, he manifests himself in the very sands of the desert. 1932 version was directed by the great German cinematographer Karl Freund, whose lighting and camera style create a mood that's mostly inside your own mind.
And yet I shall awaken memories of love and crime and death.
The 1999 version isn't in your mind, it's in your face. Both versions of The Mummy are new this week on both tape and DVD, and they're our video pick of the week. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on this week's show. Two very enthusiastic thumbs up for Three Kings. We both think it's one of the year's best films. Two more thumbs up on Happy Texas. A split decision on Guinevere. I admired its touching honesty. Jeff thought the good moments just didn't add up. Two thumbs down for Mystery Alaska, which was simply too predictable. And finally, two more thumbs down for Drive Me Crazy.
One more word about Three Kings. Leave the kids at home, leave your expectations at home, and go see this movie.
Thanks a lot for being here, Jeff. Remember, you can hear our reviews on the web, both Jeff and myself, at ebert-movies.com, part of Go Network. Next week, more new movies, including Random Heart, starring Harrison Ford and Kristen Scott Thomas as strangers who discover secrets about their spouses. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
Please pass the Polaner all fruit.
Would you please pass the all fruit?
Naturally delicious Polaner all fruit, sweetened only with fruit juice.
From Jennifer Convertibles and Jennifer Leather, the lowest prices on Sealy leather sofa beds from $6.99 to $8.99. Call 1-800-JENNIFER.
The Game of Knowledge, the fun and educational game with 2 levels of questions that challenge kids and parents in 6 exciting categories. The Game of Knowledge from University Games.
If you like eating caramel apples, you'll love Tootsie Caramel Apple Pops. So good, only the stick will remain. From Tootsie.
Closed captioning for Roger Ebert in the Movies is brought to you by...
No business wants to be in the red, but the money you save at Office Max could help keep you in the black. Office Max, we go to the max for you.
He's a man of vision, a man with